I'm a customer with Hsbc here in the United Kingdom, and they promised me a seamless transfer of money from the United Kingdom to India. I stopped investing in a retirement fund here and I sent all my money to India, which I was jointly investing with my father. The first few years they played the stock market, they made money, and once they saw that there was surplus money in my account, that's when all the problems started. For about 4 years, I wasn't provided any of my statements of accounts. They invested my money in numerous stocks that I wasn't told of. They started putting money into insurance products, and often when I would inquire whether those insurance products were right for me, they would always assure me and say, "Oh, please don't worry, we're experts in this area. We will source the best product for you, which is tailored to you, and we'll invest it in that." Needless to say, when I finally had a look at my accounts earlier this year, I found that over 80% of the money which was in my account was gone. It was a long and a torturous process to get my accounts from Hsbc. Took well over 4 months. When I finally got my statements, I started going through them and I discovered that A, there was theft. There was money missing from the account. When this was brought to the attention of Hsbc, Hsbc simply turned around and said, yeah, we'll address that. We'll probably put the money back into your account. Now, the remedy for theft is not putting the money back into the account, but it's being accountable for the money which was stolen. I then discovered that Hsbc, which had routinely been taking blank letters of instructions from me, were using those letters of instructions for churning my portfolio. I discovered upon examining my accounts and talking to several forensic accountants that the bank makes its money on entry and exit load. So irrespective of whether the customer makes the money or not, what the bank does is it buys funds and sells funds, and it makes its money. In my case, the bank was routinely taking in bunches, in sheafs of 10s and 20s letters of instructions, which they would fill up to buy the funds, and then a few months later sell the funds. I tried to get help and I reached out to numerous experts. They looked into my statements and they produced legal opinions which gave me an idea of what was happening. The legal opinion clearly states that the bank was furiously churning my portfolio so that they could make their money. I've also discovered that these are actually illegal practices. A, they are criminal. B, they are violative of numerous laws and regulations in India. And, it's very difficult as an individual to take on the might of such a large bank. I brought it to the attention of the different officers of the company. And I'm dismayed to say that despite providing them with evidence, the arrogance of the bank is baffling. After many months of corresponding with the bank, I finally managed to get my head around how the sophisticated financial fraud was taking place. I was provided with those letters of instructions which bank officers had filled up. I had spoken to forensic accountants and specialist lawyers, and by then I understood what had happened. I brought this to the attention of the bank. When I went into the bank, and you must understand the settings, it's piped music, beautiful premises, all the bankers wearing suits, which is a matter of routine in the United Kingdom, but it's not something that you take for granted in India. When you see that level of sophistication and you're provided a dedicated relationship manager, he asks you to sign on 20 copies of letters of instructions. You obviously ask the bank why blank letters of instructions, and the bank says, you live 9,000 kilometers away from here, separated by numerous time zones. The Asian markets are extremely volatile, they go up and come down. And if the portfolio starts tanking, by the time you get into the office and send us a fax letter of instruction, it would be 3:30 in India, the trading would have closed, your whole portfolio could potentially get wiped out. If we have to manage your portfolio, you must trust us. HSBC is regulated by laws, it is internally audited. After all, we are HSBC. You have to trust us if you want us to look after your wealth. Based around those representations, I mean, who would have thought a bank as large as HSBC would actually indulge in illegal practices and then use that for lining their own pockets? I mean, it couldn't be imagined at the time when you invest with them. When the bank handles your securities, they are meant to comply with regulations. And that's the promise which was made to me when I first invested with them. I've found out since that a similar representation was provided to many other non-resident Indians. Having spoken to specialist lawyers, I have figured out that a bank that actually manages your portfolio is required to register as a portfolio manager with the Securities and Exchange Board of India. And they are required to provide you a certificate which states that. When I asked the bank for their certificate, they turned around and said, for what we are doing, frankly, we don't believe we need a certificate. What the bank has been doing is it's been circumventing the regulatory framework by taking blank letters of instructions and a power of attorney, and they use that for investing in different funds. The bank then turns around and says, oh, but by the way, the form that you filled up, that form is actually an execution only form, which means you filled up that form. For many months, I kept on asking the bank for the letters of instructions, asking them to place before me what had been used for the trade. Initially, they wouldn't give those documents to me. I must have traded well over 100 emails with them. Finally, they placed in my possession the letters of instructions which they had used for carrying out the trade. And I found out that all those forms did not have my handwriting. It had my signature because they had obtained my signature, but they had filled up names of different scripts and they had bought and sold those scripts as they desired, once again for the purposes of churning. Clearly, what the bank has done is it has circumvented the regulations to make sure it profits from non-resident Indians who are sitting thousands of miles away and actually cannot actively monitor their portfolio of securities or assets which are placed in the possession of the bank. It's like being up against a wall. I have approached the chairman of the bank. I have approached the 23 board of directors of the bank. I have very politely pointed out to them how the fraud was being committed. I have placed in their possession evidence which shows that on a routine basis, banks officers would ask for blank letters of instructions and then go on to use that to commit the fraud. The bank has just turned around and said, no, it's your word versus ours. Wholly relying on the fact that if one was to proceed against them in a court of law, it would be years before any remedy could be obtained. And in the meantime, more than 80% of my life savings have disappeared. An average Joe on the street cannot take on the might of such large institutions who have an army of lawyers, highly paid execs, marketing campaigns. What really needs to happen out here is the regulators need to wake up and take action. They need to independently investigate whether these things are happening, and if it is happening, proper action must be taken. Because this is not just about a financial irregularity, there's theft, there's forgery, and numerous other criminal acts for which the bank's officers are actually responsible